So 3D Studio Max actually makes it really convenient for you to share materials between scenes. And you do that with this thing called a material library. Now, if we go over to this Get Material, we'll see that we have all sorts of different ways to get a material with this material map browser. We can grab a new one, which we may have seen before. If you grab all of it, you can, grab any one of 3D Studio's default new materials or textures. Materials come in as a little blue ball, and textures come in as a green little parallelogram there. And you can grab ray trace, shellac, standard. You can browse this by thumbnail and name, or just thumbnail, which is a bad idea usually, or a big thumbnail and name. I don't usually, especially with materials, because if you look, it'll show you a material preview here, and they really don't really have much to say. The only thing that looks anything like what it is really is ink and paint and standard maybe. So anyway, I very rarely use the previews, especially with materials, but so you can get a new one. You can browse stuff that exists in the scene. You can browse what you have selected in the scene. We'll look at that again in a second. You can browse active slot, which I don't really ever use. Material editor, something that's in here, even any of the 1 through 24 slots. You can really only have 24 slots in the material editor. It doesn't mean you can only have 24 materials in the scene. You can have as many as you want. It's just you can be sort of actively looking at 24 in these little previews at any one time. Or you can browse from a material library. Now we don't have a material library yet, so there's nothing to browse from, but we're going to make one now. So just get the material map browser up. You can also get it from the rendering menu material map browser, or you can I always just hit the get material button here. And then what you can do is you can take these materials that you've already made in one scene or another and save them out to a file so you can bring into another scene, just like importing, exporting objects, that sort of thing. But you can do a bunch of materials in one library. So we're going to take this material here and wheel paint, and I'll use this button, which is put to library, and it'll give me a chance to rename it if I really want to, but I don't really need to. I'm just going to call it wheel paint. And put wheel paint in there, and then we're going to put frame rust in there, so put to library. Okay, I'm going to put this material in, put to library, good. And I think just this one, and that's fine. So we have 4 materials in there, and I give you a little preview as well of those materials that you have made. This little checkbox here will, if you uncheck it, root only means it'll just show you essentially the material that's at the top of the hierarchy. If you uncheck it, it'll show you everything that's within the hierarchy, so you can browse any maps or submaterials that you have that are part of this material and its hierarchy. What you can do in the material map browser, right here, you have File. You can save as, and what we'll do is we'll save this as, and it'll come up in a folder called Material Libraries in whatever project you have. Or you can save it wherever you want. You don't have to put it there. You can save it on your desktop if you really want. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to call it trailer.mat is a default extension, so we save that, and it'll show up right here, trailer mat. And we can open it with in any other file, and whether it has anything to do with the trailer or not, and share these materials that we've made. Okay, so what we'll do is we can close this and close that, and then we'll just grab that our file that we were working on, and we can just start assigning. So right here, we'll take this. Now, I picked the frame, but I don't want to start assigning materials yet because otherwise I'm going to assign a material to everything. You don't want to assign material to the whole group in this case. We want to assign materials to components. So we have to go to Group, Open. We open that up, and then we can pick just the frame. So now we get our material editor up here, and we have a couple empty slots here. So I'm going to get material, and if I haven't restarted Max, if it's the same 3D Studio Max session, it'll just show up with whatever I had picked last, material library, and with the material library that I have loaded at the time. If I restart Max, I'm probably going to have to go in File, Open, and browse it to wherever it is on disk, open it up, and say, double click it, open, then I have it. I have this material library loaded. You can have as many material libraries as you want. You can have metals, cloths. You can have metal and cloth in one. You can have one according to character. It doesn't really matter how you save them out. You can have whatever makes sense to you. but you can only have one loaded at any one time. So you open, save. You can merge two together if you want to with the merge button. That will bring in a new material library, and while leaving the same one intact. But then if you save it, you'll overwrite whatever is picked here. Okay, so anyway, now you can, if you say get material, you're in a slot, and you say get material, and material map browser pops up. You can get a material by double clicking it, and it'll put it in the slot, the currently active slot. Or even easier, you can just take it here and drag and drop it into the material slot. So drop it into there, and we'll scroll over one, drop it into there, and we have our 4 materials that we can use. So what we'll do, take that frame, we have it picked. This is frame rust, so I'm going to assign it, and there we go. Now this frame rust is particular to this frame, because if I look in the bitmap, it's tiled 8 times. What that's doing is, since this is a pretty long object, I just thought, well, it looks better if it's tiled 8 times across there. That way it doesn't stretch in one direction. So this rust isn't really that useful to put onto other things, because like if I put it, if I grab this, or even better, if I grab, let's say, let's grab these axles here. If I grab these axles and assign that material to them, then I have, it's repeating 8 times across the axles, and that's not really a good idea. It doesn't look good. So what we'll do is we'll make a copy of this thing. So by dragging and dropping, you can copy that material. Now, if I can drag it to an empty slot like here. I can also drag it to a slot that exists. Even, you see these little triangles, remember from before, these little triangles mean that material is assigned to something. If the triangle is solid white, it means the material is assigned to whatever's selected. So if I select this, or if I select this here, so let's open that group as well, select this one, and then that means that material is assigned to that thing. If I drag and drop this, copy that material, it doesn't overwrite that material in the scene. You see that material is fine. That object is fine. It just overwrites it in the slot. These slots are just for preview, so you don't have to worry about stomping over materials in your scene. They'll always exist. They'll be fine. The only time you stomp over materials is if you put the material to a scene or overwrite it, and it'll give you a dialog box asking you if you want to overwrite, apply it to the scene, overwrite that material or not. So anyway, in this case, it's fine. I've just made a copy of that material. And I can always get this material back in the preview slots here. If I just click on an empty slot, or any other slot for that matter, it doesn't really matter. Click on an empty slot, and then I can either use this Get Material button, so Get Material, and then I come down here and I hit Selected. That will allow me to get that material off of that object and put it into the slot that's selected. Or even better than that, you can use the little eyedropper tool. And the eyedropper tool will pick that material, pop it into that slot of whatever you eyedropper over. So that's a really nice way to be able to pick materials. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to take these guys here, and I'm going to work on that new rust. So instead of frame rust, I'm going to call this generic rust. Okay, and that generic rust, I'm going to go in and edit that bitmap so that it doesn't tile 8 times, so that it just tiles once. So these tilings are where you can set that. So tile one time, that's it. And then I'll take that material and apply it to those things. And now it's not repeating 8 times, which works for this, but doesn't work for these. So I can take that generic rust and apply it to whatever else I want to. That apply it to this thing, whichever. So what I'll do, I'm going to take this material and I'm going to assign it to that. Just keep assigning away here. And a lot of times what I like to do is rough in some material. So I'll put this on there as well. And, that's fine. I don't know, it seems a little bit busy for this. I really made that material for the chain. It's a little bit busy for this thing, but I can always, I'll see how it looks in render. So like if I take this thing and hit render, maybe it's going to work great. And it actually doesn't look too bad, so maybe I'd be happy with that. But I kind of like to rough in materials, because then sometimes you can put a rough material on there, and in context it actually works better than you thought. So it's not a bad idea to rough in stuff. You might be able to save yourself some work at some point. All right, now I want to concentrate on these rivets here. And what I could do if I wanted to assign a material to them is I can go in and control pick each one of them. But that would be a hassle. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to, with something that's has a lot of them like this. You want to really deal with them as either a group or by name. And unfortunately, I didn't apply a naming convention to these. I should have. If I take my own advice, I should have. The very first one that I created, I should have called it Rivet 1 or Rivet 0 and then multiplied them. But I didn't do that, so now they're all called sphere blah blah blah. So what I can do is I can go in here and pick all the sphere, blah blah blahs, just control clicking them, or I can go in and go sphere, pick all the sphere, pick anything with sphere in its name in the scene. So I click OK. And for this scene, it works out okay because there was nothing else that started out with the word sphere. So that's all right. It's fine to do that. However, if I had not established a very good naming convention, I built tons of things out of spheres, I'm going to pick all of that stuff in doing this. So, you can see already that even just working by yourself, establishing a naming convention can help you. And if you work with other people, you're really going to want to pay attention to a good naming convention. So having said that, now we can go in and clean this up a little bit. It's not too hard, fortunately. So we just go Tools, Rename Objects, and then I'll give it a base name, and I'll just call it Rivet. Okay, and then numbered, so I increment the number, starting at 0, incrementing by 1. Hit rename, and then we'll see that each one of those is called Rivet something or other. Now, when I go in here and I say just pick Rivet, I know that I'm just going to be picking the rivets, and I'm not accidentally,